morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Yidden. Good morning, Yidden. Welcome, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome, everybody on Zoom. Welcome, everybody on the yeshiva.net. Welcome, everybody on YouTube. Welcome, everybody, wherever you are. Great Neck. We have a large contingency from Great Neck. Welcome to the community. Welcome to everybody from Monsey. All other parts of North and South America, of course. We always have our special students from the Holy Land, from Eretz Yisrael. Teaneck, New Jersey, and other parts of New Jersey. South Africa, Melbourne, Sydney, some parts of Asia, so Europe. Welcome to everybody. You'll forgive me that I'm not going to go through everybody's names, but consider it that I have. Okay, you could see me and hear me? Just give me a thumbs up. It's clear? Beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, Yashikoychechem. We're going to begin mamash momentarily. Okay, as usual, afterwards I'll take some questions. So feel free to ask any questions. If you're on the Zoom, you can put your questions into chat. And if you're on the yeshiva.net, you could put your questions there by the sidebar, ask your question, and bli neder, I will address all the questions. Today's class is dedicated to a very, very special woman who was taken from us recently, and a personal friend and relative to many of you who are joining us here today, Esther Kalati, Esther Bas Eliyahu, who was 43 years old, and after a 20-month battle with lung cancer has returned her soul to its maker just a few weeks ago on Shabbos, November 7th, 2020, the 20th day of Cheshvan, Shabbos Parshas Vayeshev, the 20th day of Cheshvan, 5781. So this week is the Shloshim, the 30-day period since her tragic passing at the age of 43. Esther Dorina was one of the great lights of the Jewish world, and particularly of the special community of Great Neck. Any of you who are from Great Neck or familiar with Great Neck know she was one of the most beloved and cherished Torah teachers in the community, an exceptional life coach. She guided lovingly and mentored, helped, inspired, and kindled the flames and hopes, not only among family and friends, but people from close and far, in every possible way. Her impact, her influence, the power of her faith, her wisdom, her empathy, and her caring were extraordinary. And indeed, the entire community mourns the passing of such a great spiritual person, such a beacon of light and hope and love at the age of 43. I want to express my deepest condolences to her husband, life's partner, Ariel, to her 3 beautiful young children who adored their mother and who were so loved and cherished by their mother, Ethan, Jonah, Leah. Of course, our deepest condolences to her mother, who's still with us, Diana, Dina, and to her brother, and to her brother, my dear friend Daron, who's dedicating this class in honor of his sister who he was so close to and they had such a special relationship. It's never ever easy to lose such a person, any person, especially such a person, especially at such an age, such a young age. It's excruciatingly painful, difficult to comprehend and wrap our brains around. One thing we know is that her light will never be obliterated. Her children will carry her soul, her love, her passion in the future of their lives, pass it on, God willing, to their children. And everyone she touched, the values she bequeathed to others, the faith that she helped others discover, the wisdom that she imparted to others, continue to live and inspire as her soul experiences its unique journey in the world of truth and in the bosom of God. So this class is dedicated in her loving memory, La'elu Nishmata, and as a tribute to her. She was born on Shabbos, she passed away on Shabbos, and her life was one of Shabbos. Serenity, peace, inner joy, inner connection with herself, with her loved ones, with her family, with her community, and with the creator of the world. Tahei nishmata tzura b'tzror hachayim. May her soul be bound up in the eternal bond of life. And it's an honor for me to dedicate this shiur, this class, in her memory. I'll begin with a little anecdote. Which I thought was cute. There was this Jew who made a Chanukah party. And he invited all the guests to come, relatives and family. It was a lavish Chanukah party. He was somebody who loved Judaica and loved antiques. He would always go to auctions and purchase old items. And he had this library, a treasure chest of all these beautiful historic items from the days of yore. So at this Chanukah party, he made sure to show off to the guests, all the antiques he had. So as people were sitting at the table and enjoying the latkes and the donuts and the other good Chanukah delicious food that was being served, the man pointed to the menorah and he says, "You see this menorah? This menorah is 450 years old. It was created by so-and-so in this country. You see this dreidel come from Poland before the war. You see this oil? This oil was used during the Second World War." He goes through everything, candles, the wax that's still on the menorah. Somebody was sitting there and was eating the donuts. The man says, "And how old are these donuts?" So the story of Chanukah is a very old story. It's close to 2,200 years old. That's a long time. America celebrated Thanksgiving recently, so that's a story that's also old, but it's a few hundred years old, from the 1620s. Which is 400 years old. Nice amount of time. But you can't compare it with the Chanukah story that is more than 2,000 years old. And yet, there's an aspect of it, all aspects of it, that is extremely fresh and vibrant and relevant and extremely contemporary to our times today. And it's one aspect of the story that I want to share that I feel is very relevant to many of our lives. Let's first remember the facts of the story, even though they're known, but it's always good to remind ourselves the facts. The story takes us back to the year 164 before the Common Era, 164 BCE. This is around 150 years before the birth of Christianity. It's 2 centuries before the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans. Israel, Judea, Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land, was under the rule of the empire of Alexander the Great, who of course came from Macedonia. He's known as Alexander Mogdon in Greece. A Syrian ruler known as Antiochus V ascended the throne and was determined to impose his values on the Jewish people. He set up a statue of Zeus in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. He systematically desecrated Jerusalem's holy sites. He imposed horrific restrictions on the practices of Judaism at the pain of death. Many a Jew were barbarically tortured, mutilated, executed when they were found practicing Judaism. The flame of Yiddishkeit came very close to being extinguished. Jews were forced to offer sacrifices, pagan sacrifices, to pagan gods, including to a swine, offering a swine, a pig, sacrificing a pig in the Beis HaMikdash. The high priests that he appointed were completely surrendered and subservient to the new Hellenist ideal. And in fact, many Jews supported this. It just felt right for them. Why fight City Hall? In fact, many aspects of Greek culture were very enthralling and enticing for the Jews, even though it came with such a heavy price of human torture and blood and cruelty. A small group of Jews, led by the elderly priest Matisyahu and his sons, rose in revolt. They fought a brilliant campaign, and within 3 years, they recaptured Jerusalem. They removed all of the horrible objects from the temple. They restored Jewish autonomy. It was, as we say in the Chanukah prayers, a victory of the weak against the many, the weak against the strong, the few against the many. Religious liberty was established, and the Beis HaMikdash was rededicated. That's why it's called Chanukah, which means rededication. But let's go one step further. What was at the core of the conflict? So in the Al Hanissim prayers, the prayers of Chanukah, we describe the core of the conflict. And we say, and I'll quote, this is from the prayers of all the services of Chanukah and the grace after meals. B'mei Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol Chashmonai Yovanov K'sha'amda Malchus Yavan HaRisha Al Amchi Yisrael Ashkichem Teirasecha Lavirim Mechukei Yitzenecha. Meaning, we say it was in the days of Matisyahu, the son of Yochanan, the high priest, the Chashmonai and his sons, when the wicked Hellenistic regime, the Syrian Greeks, rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and violate the decrees of your will. I want you to reflect on these words. La'ashkicham teirasecha u'la'avirim mechukei yitzenecha. They wanted to make the Jews forget your Torah, we're talking to God, and to violate the decrees of your will. Now, every word in prayer is precise. Why does it not say when the wicked Hellenistic regime rose up against your people Israel to make them forget the Torah and violate the mitzvahs? Why the emphasis on your Torah and the decrees of your will? Well, you'll say, what's the difference, this expression, that expression? Every word is precise. It should have said, this evil regime stood up. Lahashkicham ha-Torah. They wanted Jews to forget Torah. Ula'avirim ha-mitzvahs. And they should all violate the mitzvahs. But you see, the prayer is much more specific. They wanted the Jews to forget your Torah. They wanted the Jews to violate chukei ritzonecha, the decrees of your will. This is not just a small change. It's not only poetic. They wanted me to forget your Torah. It actually goes to the heart of the conflict. Because this was not just a conflict about religious freedom. It ran much deeper. And in that sense, it persists till today. Not only outside of us, but also inside of us. How do we explain this deeper level of the conflict? And the answer is, you look at the words. They wanted we should forget your Torah, not Torah, your Torah. Lashkicham Torah secha. Lahavira mechukei utzenecha. They didn't want us to forget mitzvahs. They were fine with mitzvahs. What they wanted is that we should violate the decrees of your will. Now, what does this mean? Why were they fine with Torah and with mitzvahs? You see, it was not the Torah per se that the Hellenistic regime wanted to uproot from the people of Israel. It was your Torah. Nor were they just against the precepts of Torah on their own. What bothered them was chukei ritzonecha, the decrees of your will that they wanted to outlaw, that they wanted to obliterate from the Jewish world. And take note of the word chukei, lahaviram mechukei ritzonecha. The 613 mitzvahs of the Torah fall under three categories: mishpatim, edut, and chukim. Mishpatim are laws. Edus are testimonials. Chukim are decrees. Laws, mishpatim, are the most rational of the mitzvahs. In fact, these are mitzvahs that a human mind can not only easily understand and grasp, but even embrace enthusiastically. It makes so much sense. A normal mind can envision the concept that the rich should give charity to the poor, that a child should respect his parents, that murder, theft, lying, torture, abuse ought to be forbidden. Even if they were not divinely legislated, these are laws that the human mind can easily fathom and grasp and adhere to. A civil society needs laws in order to survive. What you dislike to be done to you, don't do to anybody else. This is the golden rule, and it's the basis of any civilized society, whether you're an atheist or a believer. These are what you call rational laws. Did everybody embrace them in history? Absolutely not. Sometimes, with rationality, you can go anywhere. You can use your mind to justify the worst of actions. But nobody's going to argue that these are irrational laws. They don't make sense. They make a lot of sense. You have to have certain premises. If you don't think life is sacred, and you don't think that what should be done, what you would like, you should do to somebody else, okay, you can argue with it. But it certainly, logic creates a lot of space for these laws. Testimonials, edus, are a different category of mitzvahs. They are mitzvahs which commemorate. They symbolize enduring and valuable truths. For example, Shabbos. Shabbos attests to the fact that we don't own the world. We're the stewards of creation. Passover, Pesach, commemorates our exodus from Egypt, our emancipation from slavery, going to freedom. Now, these types of laws, these types of mitzvahs, like Purim, like Chanukah, like Pesach, like Sukkot, they're not maybe rational. I wouldn't conceive them on my own. But nonetheless, they make a lot of sense. We all appreciate the concepts of symbols and anniversaries and commemorating events. So they also have a lot of room within logic. America just celebrated Thanksgiving. Why? To commemorate the journey of the pilgrims on the Mayflower, coming here, experiencing harsh winters, and many of them surviving the harsh winters, not all of them, and expressing Thanksgiving. So we still today celebrate it in America. But what's the concept of it? The concept of it is it makes a lot of sense. A nation needs a story, a family needs a story, and you commemorate it. Why do you celebrate wedding anniversaries or birthdays? Makes sense. But then there's the third category of mitzvahs called chukim. Chukim are decrees. These are what you would call super-rational mitzvahs. For example, prohibition against eating meat and milk, mixing milk and meat. The laws of mikveh, not to wear wool and linen. I'm just giving examples of some of the mitzvahs. These are mitzvahs. God says, this is my decree. This is what I want. The Talmud says. These are my decrees. Here the mind has to acknowledge its limitations, conceding that there are truths which are beyond its finite scope. Now, to the Greeks, the human being was supreme. The body of the athlete and the mind of the philosopher were the pinnacle of existence. If man was perfect, he was God. To have suggested that there is something more transcendent than man's glory, his brain, his mind, his intelligence, his intellect, this was heresy. Torah, the Greeks said, by all means, I don't care. In university, we have branches for different forms of wisdom. We can have a branch to study Torah. The Hellenists can respect the Jews' philosophy as part of the great human quest for knowledge. He can also recognize that there are philosophically sound and psychologically valuable ideas in Torah. Laws, the backbone of any civilized society. They have no problem with that. Testimonials, also great. Decrees, chukim, that they won't accept. I have to understand the rationale behind the mitzvah. I can't accept it simply because it's divine law. That doesn't make sense. If it makes sense, I can accept it. If it doesn't make sense, sorry, it's not for me. This is what we mean when we say lahavira mechukei ritzeinecha. They wanted to make the Jews forget your Torah and violate decrees of your will. It's not the Torah and the mitzvahs that perturbed them so much. It's the fact that they constitute your Torah. They are decrees of your will. This is what bothered them. It was the chukah aspect of Judaism, the super-rational decrees that they could not make peace with. Torah as just another form of human ideas, I have no problem. Torah secha, the divinity of Torah, the godliness of Torah, they could not accept. Let's take it one step deeper. It doesn't say lahavira mechukecha. They wanted you should violate the chukim. It says lahavira mechukei ritzeinecha. Violate the decrees of your will. They could have said lahavira machukim. But really it goes one step deeper. The Greeks can accept and concede to the fact that there are some laws which we don't understand, but not because they don't have a reason. It's just that reason is beyond. It's just that the reason is beyond my finite logic today. If you have a brilliant teacher who always guides you rationally, and one day he gives you an instruction which doesn't make sense to you, it's still logical to obey because you know that he has a logic even though you don't understand it. I can appreciate, every normal person understands that I have not mastered all the knowledge that there is to master. So even if there's something I don't understand today, I'll understand it tomorrow. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe in a month, maybe in a year, maybe in 10 years. We all understand that there are people who are more brilliant than us, that know more. And any respected scientist or intellectual of any sort understands that the most foolish thing to say is that we know everything. Imagine you go to a therapist and he says, I know everything there is to know about human psychology. Or you go to a neurologist and he tells you, I know everything there is to know about the human brain. It's one of the most foolish things a wise person can say. The definition of wisdom is the openness to new horizons and new ideas and new insights. The Greeks were not stupid. They were great philosophers. So if you tell them, there's a mitzvah, you know what? Maybe we don't understand it today, but there's a reason. We'll understand it tomorrow. That they don't have a problem with. That is not really their issue. Every person can understand that there's things I don't understand today. So they can accept mitzvahs that are beyond their logic as long as there is some reason why an intelligent people is doing these things. When you say no reason, you mean no known reason. You mean no reason whatsoever. You mean we don't understand everything. But there is some reason. Every law has to have a reason. There has to be a logic. I have to understand that there is a logic behind it. And therefore, the same is with Torah. Can I understand everything? I don't have to understand everything. Fine, that's fine. Beyond reason, beyond my reason today, but there has to be some reason. This is where there was a profound conflict. Because the essence of Judaism is based on the conviction that God, the author of reason, transcends not only the universe, transcends even logic. The ultimate value of Torah and mitzvahs is that it's God's inner will, his intimate desire beyond reason. We do mitzvahs in order to connect and be one with God in his intimate essence and purity. Are there reasons? There are plenty of reasons. Can we discuss the rationality of many of the mitzvahs? Of course. Is Torah rational? It's the source of rationality. But that's not its essence. Its essence is that it's divine energy, it's divine truth which transcends reason, because Hashem is the one who created logic and created reason and therefore is not defined by it. And the truth is, it's not only true about the Creator, it's also true about a person. If I ask you a question, how much of your life is guided by rational decisions, and how much of your life is guided by decisions that are not necessarily rational? So most people would like to say that we're guided by rational decisions. We're all rational people, and hopefully we try to be rational people and think things through. That's true. But what is more powerful in the person? Our inner wills and desires that transcend rationality, or our rationality? So for thousands of years, philosophers believed that rationality is the most powerful tool in a person's life. And if you convince somebody rationally for something, you'll solve the problem. In Kabbalah, it was never understood that way. In Kabbalah, Keser is above Chachma. The first faculty of wisdom is called Chachma, and above that is Keser, which is the crown, which means Ratzon, the will. In other words, will transcends logic. Because the truth is that there is something much deeper than rationality in the human soul and the human brain. Yes, we're rational. We like to be rational people and we want to understand things. And if you can explain to me certain things, I may change my mind. But the deepest convictions and the deepest values that you have are not based on rationality. Today, in psychology, this is a well-accepted truth over the last century. But for thousands of years, everyone thought the philosopher, that's the pinnacle of the human being. That's how you get to people, through their mind, through their logic. But sit down with anybody who's struggling with something, with disappointment, with pain, with a feeling of incompetence, with wounds, with scars, with anxiety, with stress, with disappointment, with depression, with other toxic ideas, feelings, senses, thoughts, emotions, with trauma. And explain to them rationally that logically doesn't make sense. How much is it going to help? You're dealing with processes in a person that are much deeper than his rational or her rational mind. And you have to address those processes. From a Jewish perspective, especially the Kabbalistic tradition, Ratzon is much deeper than Chachma. Chachma is very powerful, but Ratzon, desire, your inner values are much deeper than that. I said yesterday in my class, I was once talking to a top therapist, and I said to him, I want to ask you a question. How do you know that you hit the spot? When you're sitting with a patient, how do you know that you really got it? You touched the spot. And he said something very profound. He said, as long as they are explaining their positions, as long as they are rationally justifying what they believe in, and there's a logic to it, I know that I did not get them to spill the beans. I did not let them become connected with their inner core. I said, so when do you know you got them connected to an inner truth? He said, when all the explanations go out the window. There's no more rational justifications. There's no more structuring things in boxes and making sense out of them. Rather, I'll see tears flowing down their cheeks, and they'll look at me and they'll say, this is who I am. These are my dreams. These are my needs. These are my deepest desires. These are my aspirations. It's just who I am. But why? It's irrelevant. The why is not touching that spot. Why is a later addition. Our brain dresses up our inner desires with logical explanations. So it's packaged nicely, and it's presentable to the public, including presentable to us. But if you want to get deeper into your neshama, deeper into your brain, much deeper than rationality and logic, are inner, deep aspirations and yearnings that are not about logic. You see, logic structures everything. It gives it a certain definition and structure and reason. You know, you could seal the box, tape it up, put a label on it. Okay, reason number 1, reason number 2, reason number 3. That itself means it's not coming from the innermost place of the soul. The innermost place of the soul is not a logical entity. So what is it made up of? Its energy is rooted in a place of infinity. It's aligned with the Ein Sof. It's aligned with the source of existence. God is not logic. God created logic. So if God created logic, he or she is completely not defined by it. Yes, God created logic and we cherish logic and we use it, but it's not the beginning and the end of everything. It has its contribution that it plays in history and in life. And it must be utilized to its fullest, if we even can utilize it to its fullest, because it's an exceptional tool. But it's not the core of life. It's not the core of psychology. It's not the core of self-awareness. It's not the core of growth. On the contrary, if I am operating on a level of logic, I am operating on an external level. Everything fits, it's perfect, but I'm not really operating from my deepest place. Because if I'll be operating from my deepest place, over there, things are far deeper than any logical structure or explanation or justification. In fact, many people become so logical because they're afraid to unleash the inner energy. They're afraid to unleash their deepest emotions. They don't want to turn on that faucet. They don't want to turn that valve. They don't want that flow to happen. So the brain protects them, and everything becomes logical, but it's cold, it's a little detached, it's cerebral. It's not living life. We need our mind to guide us. We need our mind to help us harness emotions. We need our mind to tell us and distinguish between threats, real threats and fake threats, between delusions and truth, between completely misguided ideas versus things that have validity. So logic is very, very valuable, but it's valuable as a stepping stone. It's valuable as a tool to remove the debris, falsehoods, superficiality, to get rid of ridiculous ideas and so forth, to be able to serve as a barometer if I'm just barking up the wrong tree. But the real truth of me, of relationships, is in a place that's much deeper than any logic. Let me give an example from marital therapy. So a husband and a wife are sitting in the therapist's office. It can work both ways. I can give the example both ways. Since it's a woman's class, I'm going to give it one way, but it can also be the other way. So any man who's listening to me, please don't think that I'm discriminating against men. I have nothing against men. In fact, I myself happen to be a man, if you noticed. So I have absolutely nothing against men. I'm just talking to women. So I'm giving an example from this side. We can give the exact same example from the other perspective. Now you're going to ask me which one happens more often. I don't know. You'll speak to your therapist and you'll find out which one happens more often. So there was a woman sitting there and she's crying. She's discussing her needs, her dreams, her desires, her disappointments, how difficult it is with the relationship and the communication and what's going on with the kids and what's going on with the house and what's going on with work and what's going on at night and what's going on in the bedroom and what's going on in the kitchen and what's going on in their conversations and what's not going on. And the therapist turns to the husband and says, "What do you say?" So here's a classic, right? He starts logically explaining why his wife is wrong. This doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. And since he learned Gemara for so many years, and he honed his intellectual skills, he becomes an expert on this. And it's like an encyclopedia, and he explains everything, and he gives a beautiful shiur, a beautiful class. And what does his wife do? She picks up both of her hands, like, in despair yet once again. What is this guy missing? What's this guy missing? He may be right in the world of cerebral logic. He may be right. But people are not computers. She's having deeper experiences, deeper emotions. You'll say, well, she shouldn't. let everything be intellectual and logical. The problem is that's not true. It's not a human being. You can make somebody be like that only if you kill their soul. If you repress their emotions, their sensations, their inner experiences, their inner world. If you want me to be a computer, fine. I can be a lifeless computer. Okay. So the therapist explains this to the man. He says, when your wife says, I want something, I need something, I value something, don't start proving her wrong. You have to create space for that. This is her reality. This is her truth. Right. So the husband matures and grows up and says, okay, turns to his wife and says, if this is what you want, this is what I'm going to do. Even though it does not make sense to me and it's not logical, this is what I'm going to do. When she leaves the office, he turns to the therapist. He says, but now you have to explain to me why. You have to explain to me the logic behind of what she wants. I'll do it, but I want to understand the logic. I'll do it. I'm a good man. I'm not selfish. I want a good marriage. I'll do it. But now explain to me why. Or he'll go back to his wife and say, listen, I'll do what you want, but I need to understand why. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to convince you otherwise. I'll do what you want, but explain it to me. Again, he missed the boat. Why did he miss the boat? He missed the boat because he is believing that life's decisions, that life's values, that life's deepest yearnings are based on logic. They're not. They're not. Now, this is a shock for a lot of people, I have to tell you, because when you grow up among Jews, logic is considered tremendous. And all learning, much of learning, you have to use your brain, your analytical brains to understand. And they're always questioning and refuting. But we have to understand that if we get stuck there, we can actually be learning like the Greeks. There's the Greek inside of me who is not ready to really embrace that the core of life is not seichel. The core of life is infinity. The core of life is divinity. The core of life is elikus. The core of life is ein sof. The core of life is that your soul is a chelik eloikam imal mamish. Your soul is a fragment of God, and God is not an intellectual entity. God created intellect, created logic. Logic is beautiful. We're not enemies of logic at all. We're not enemies of rationality. We love it, we cherish it, we embrace it, we use it. But it's not the essence of life. So, but tell me why. There's no why. If there's a why, it's not me. It's a garment. If there is a why, you did not touch the core. You only got to the corridor. You got to the foyer. You got to the rooms, to the hallway. You didn't get into the intimate chamber of my soul. As long as you're asking me why, or I'm asking myself why, I am not touching the deeper parts of my truth. The deeper parts of my truth, there's no why. It comes from a place that is deeper than why. So you say, why? Because this is who I am. But why are you this way? Because this is who I am. These are my deepest ritzonos. These are my deepest yearnings and aspirations. Can you make space for that in your wife? Can you make space for that in your husband? If you can, this can single-handedly change your relationship. If you can really, really make space for it in yourself and then in somebody else. You can't make space for this in somebody else if you can't make space for this in yourself. It's not the only thing you need to have a good marriage, but it's an important piece. So you see the two steps that I developed here? Step number one is the person says, I can't do it if I don't understand. Step number two is, I'll do it, but I still need to know that there's a reason. And both are misguided. And these are the two steps that exist in our marriage with Hashem too. There is a Judaism that is not based. There is a Judaism, let's call it it's called the Greek version of Judaism. I'll learn Torah. I believe in it. It's intellectually brilliant. It's dazzling. It's amazing. It's so good for the brain. But you know what? You're missing the point. You're an intellectual. It's satisfying for the brain, and it's good. You're doing an amazing thing, but you're missing the core. Lashkicham Torah. You're missing the Elokus in Torah. You're missing the Edelkeit in Torah. Edelkeit means refinement. I want to teach Greatneck this word, Edelkeit, refinement. Edel is one of the Yiddish Ashkenazic words. You're missing the godliness in Torah. Lashkicham Torah secha, the pnimius, the essence of Torah. When I'm learning Torah, of course there's a lot of intellect. I told you, Torah is the source of intellect. Judaism is the source of rationality. And it's important never to dismiss rationality. I'll tell you why. Because it's our only defense to distinguish between cults and non-cults. The moment you dismiss rationality and you say, oh, it's just about emunah and faith, you allow a person to sometimes live in delusions and create philosophies or ideas in life that are corrupt or ridiculous or absurd. So we need to use our critical mind, and that's why the critical mind is so valuable in Judaism, to be able to distinguish truth from falsehood. And it's also true in our emotional life. You say everything is emotion, yeah. But if you're feeling right now that a lion is coming through the window of your room and coming into the house, right? Then everything has to stop. I should stop giving a class and I should run away. So we have to use our critical mind to be able to objectify things and be able to distinguish between objective facts, subjective feelings, and to be able to navigate it. So it's so important. What is more, somebody who was growing up with the notion that Judaism is completely non-intelligent, it's based on myths, religious myths, there's no logic to it, there's no rationality to it, everything that we accept is based on blind faith, which means we close our eyes and we refuse to look. The only way I can begin to address such an argument is through some type of rational conversation showing that there is a huge amount of rationality in Judaism. In fact, some of the greatest principles of Judaism can be explained and proven rationally. So it's very, very important. And when you're deciding what to do for a Chanukah family trip, right? You're going to say, I feel that this is what I want. You have to look at the facts and what's available and what's not available during Corona. This is where rationality is so valuable and important as a function of life, but not as the tool to allow you to experience the essence of life and the essence of relationships. The essence of relationships transcends rational logic. It touches the place of the deepest infinity of the human soul, which transcends logic, because logic is not the beginning of existence. Logic is an aspect of existence. It's not the genesis and core of existence. Logic is not infinite. Logic is finite. Like the Maharal of Prague writes, we don't call Hashem Haseichel Baruch Hu. God is the blessed mind. God is the creator of the mind. Right? We say in Tehillim, the beautiful expression in Tehillim, in the melody, in the song of Wednesday. Hanoita oizen halayishma, im yoitzerayin halayabit. If God creates an ear, he could certainly hear. If he forms an eye, he could certainly see. But you can't define him as an eye or an ear. He can see and he can hear, and he can think and he can understand. Atu chakim v'la b'chachma yediyah, the Zohar says. You're wise, but not with the know and chachma. You're the source of chachma. So the Maharal says that's why we call him HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh is aloof, infinite, sublime, even beyond intellect. He argues with Maimonides because the Rambam defines Hashem in three places, in Hilchos Yesod HaTorah, in Hilchos Tshuva, and in Moreh Nevuchim, as Hu Amadu, Hu HaYodea, Hu HaYadua. The Rambam says he is the knower, he is the known, and he's the instrument of knowledge. So the Maharal says that they should have called him the intellect, blessed be he. They say the Holy One, blessed be he, because he transcends logic. The Tanya says that there's no ultimate contradiction, because the Maharal is speaking pre-tzimtzum and the Rambam is speaking post-Tzimtzum. It's beyond the realm of this class. But in one sentence, the Rambam is addressing divine infinity post the restrictiveness in which infinity is compressed into finite structures, beginning with Chachma, and the Maharal is addressing divine infinity in its pure, unmitigated form, so to speak, where there's no form and therefore no structure, because logic is always about structure. They say there were two students who took a philosophy class in a great university. I said two. There were many students who were studying philosophy at the feet of a great professor. And after years and years of study, they're finally going to take their last exam, which will demonstrate if they failed or they passed, if they can get their degree or lose their degree, forfeit their degree. So they prepared for weeks and months for this exam, going through all the texts and all the books and all the dissertations and all the essays and all the materials the professors prepared for them over the years. They had to master everything. It was so difficult. It was excruciatingly painful and exhausting to go through all this material, but this was the only option if you wanted to pass. Finally, the day comes and the professor gives all the students an exam. They expected an exam with 300 questions. It's going to take them 8 hours to answer, maybe a few days. Instead, the exam had one question. And the question consisted of one word. And the word was, why? Question mark. So the students see a question, why? Question mark. So they begin to answer. And they write pages and pages, dissertations, essays, to explain why. Why? Everybody failed besides two students. One got an A and one got an A+. Who got an A? The student who wrote why, he wrote one word, because. The second student, he got an A+. Why? His answer was two words. Why not? You see the difference? Everybody failed. They were busy. Why? The other student says, why? Because. But he didn't get it. He didn't get the best mark. The best mark was given to the student who wrote, why not? Because the one who wrote because, he's not giving any reason. He's just saying because. You say why, I say because. But he's still stuck in the world of logic. The other student, why not? In other words, since when is why a justified question? It's a justified question in a world that is dictated by logic. But what about a world and reality that's not dictated by logic? It comes from a place beyond logic. So the question why doesn't begin. Not a question of why, and you'll tell me why? Because X, Y, and Z. Or because of a reason I don't understand. No, the question doesn't begin. Why not? So you'll say, but what do you mean? Our universe is based on logic. There's so much logic. The laws of nature. The laws of nature are rational, but to a certain degree. Ultimately, every why can be questioned. But why? But why? But why? And at some point, you're going to have to stop and say, because. Anything you discuss, science, physics, mathematics, chemistry, astronomy, cosmology, geology, philosophy, psychology, even the basic facts of life. I once saw a video somebody sent me of one of the greatest physicists of the last generation was Richard Feynman. He was part of the Manhattan Project. He was considered one of the brilliant physicists of the last generation. So somebody asked him, why do magnets, when you bring two magnets together, they repel each other? What is this energy that you're feeling? What is it? Why? So he turned to a person and said, explain to me, what does why mean? What does why mean? So he said, your grandmother ended up in the hospital. I say, why? Why is she in the hospital? So you'll tell me, because she fell and broke her hip. So he said, okay, if you live in a culture where people know what hospitals are and how you go to hospitals, that's a wonderful answer. But if you live if you're in another continent or another age of history, you say, so why the hospital? So now you have to explain what a hospital is. But how did she get to the hospital? So now you have to explain. Her husband took her. But why would her husband take her to the hospital? So now you have to explain the relationships. But 1 second, why did she slip on ice? Why did she slip? Why did she break her hip? Because she slipped. Why, when you slip, do you fall? Ooh, now you have to get into the laws of gravity. Now, why do the laws of gravity work the way they do? You see, it all makes sense after I accept there's laws of gravity. When you slip, you fall. When you fall, you break your hip. Why does your hip get broken when you fall? Because the body contacted the ice in that particular fashion, and now you have to discuss the makeup of the body. But why is the body made up that way? So you'll say, well, this is important to the organism and the structure of the body. And then there's a deeper layer, and yet a deeper layer, and at some point it's because. He said, and why do you slip on ice? Why do you slip on other things? So now you have to explain the difference between ice and water. If it expands, it restricts. If it expands or it shrinks. Why does it work that way? So now you have to explain the physics of ice and the physics of water. And you'll go deeper and deeper and deeper. So most of us, it'll drive us crazy. Why is she in the hospital? Because she slipped and broke her hip. Good. But you know how many other whys that's based on? And you think you can ever end? At some point, the laws of nature, even though they're unbelievably rational, and it's probably one of the greatest proofs that there is a creator, because how suddenly, from chaos, randomness, and from random mutations that have absolutely no basis in an intelligent creator, did so many rational laws come to be. And it's not one law that happens to be rational. There are scores, countless rational laws, and they synchronize with each other in order to create the conditions that support the existence of life on our planet and that support generally the existence of a cosmos. And it's all based on laws. And all science is based on laws. There's no laws of nature, there's no science. So even the greatest atheist who's teaching or working in his lab or doing his experiments is expecting laws of nature, and he's searching for them when he's unaware of them. He goes into his lab every morning claiming there's no God, but he's relying that there are predictable laws of nature that govern science yesterday, will govern it today, and will govern it tomorrow. And he's aware of them, and he relies on them, and he trusts them. And you know what he's doing? He's trying to figure out more laws that we're unaware of, and more patterns. And they all happened randomly by mistake. It's a little strange. It makes a little more sense, in my mind at least, to say that laws have a creator. Somebody created these systems. So the rationality of the laws of nature are an incredible testimony to the fact that this world is not a chaotic place. But ultimately, at some point, you're going to have to stop asking why. Why is this the law of nature? Well, it allows for this to happen this way. But why do we need it to happen that way? Well, if not, so how is that a justification? You'll get to why and why and why, and ultimately, you're going to have to say, because. Because what? It's just the way it is. We don't understand. But then you'll have to go deeper and say, because it's not rooted in a place of logic. You don't understand. God is not logic. God created logic. And therefore, how do I touch God? I have to touch myself. Can't do it with logic. And this is where the Greeks missed the point. And here is where Chanukah becomes a very personal experience. I have the Greek inside of me. I could learn Torah. I can observe mitzvahs. I can teach Torah. Lashkichem Torah secho. But I'm not ready to touch the pnimius of Torah, the elokus of Torah, the godliness of Torah, the infinity of Torah. Torah for me is information that fills my brain. It challenges me. I get analytical. I make a pilpul. I dissect. I go deeper. Another explanation, and I create a puzzle. And it's amazing. And it's true. It may be true. May not be true, but may be true. But I didn't touch the Torah. Just like in a relationship that you have with somebody, I'm explaining myself and you're explaining yourself, but we never looked each other into the eye. How long don't you hear me?
People are texting and they can't hear you. The video is working off the sound.
Okay, what about now? Yeah? How about now? Okay, now you have to show me with your fingers how long ago did you stop hearing me? 10 minutes?
She said 5 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Maybe somebody could text me what I was talking about when you stopped hearing me, because I don't remember. Did I finish the marriage analogy? If anybody remembers what I was talking about when you stopped hearing my voice, if you could text me so I'll know, or put it in the chat. Because I don't think I should repeat the whole class now.
Logic, she said.
What did it say?
Logic.
I'm talking about logic the whole class. I'm saying specifically. Okay. So, I'm sorry. I guess that something went wrong with the mic. So thank you for all the feedback. Did you mind refilling this with coffee? Okay, so let's okay, I'm glad to see in the chat all the feedback, how everybody understood. One says you finished the marriage analogy. Somebody said you just finished the analogy of going straight on a highway. You said that logic kills the soul. You said there were 2 reasons to doubt your addiction to logic and stop thinking with a limited mind. Yeah. One of the painful realities that we see in life is that when we confront pain, we try to create structures of logic around the pain. Either we deny part of it, we bargain with it, we make sense out of it. You know what I'm talking about? I want it should work, it should sit comfortable within me. And there's a reason for that. We want to own our lives. We want to feel that curveballs cannot surprise us. Even those of us who like to be spontaneous, but I want to be in control. And I want to tell you something, that this is one of the great traps in people's internal lives. When we are compelled to make sense out of pain, and to make sure that everything has a place in my brain and my soul. It's a form of control. I want to control God, I want to control the world, I want to control my family, I want to control myself, I want to control reality. There are 2 things that happen in that approach. Number 1, very often a part of me dies, God forbid, because my inner core, the inner pain, has not been embraced, it has not been dealt with. I covered it up through logical structures, but my inner vulnerability, I'd never really embraced. That's number 1. Number 2, what happens is, I can't really maximize the opportunity in this moment because I'm running away from the moment. I'm turning the moment into some type of statue, into some type of fake structure. But God is mystery. God is infinity. There are aspects of Hashem that we can fathom. There's aspects of life that we love and appreciate and cherish, and we want to run with it. But very often our experiences in life, do not try to make sense out of them. You are facing the infinite mystery of reality, the infinite mystery of God. Don't reduce the experience. Don't limit it. Don't try to have your limited brain control it and wrap itself around it and sculpture it. Allow yourself to look at the mystery, shrug your shoulders, shed a tear, or start laughing. And embrace the truth of the moment. Embrace the truth of the experience with vulnerability. I want to strip myself from all the layers and all the cover-ups that I need in order to make sense out of this. Can I just sit with the true reality of the moment, with the true reality of what I'm feeling, with the true reality of experience? If you can, you are now going to touch God, and therefore you'll touch yourself. When I don't do this, when I try to grasp everything with my limited mind and reduce the reality to my mind, first of all, I'm not dealing with what's happening inside of me. I am making believe that I'm a robot, I'm a computer, and it may come back to bite me. I may have to amputate my inner